You ever feel like you're doing everything right? You're showing up, you're praying, you're staying positive, you're giving your best, and yet silence. No sign, no signal, no whisper from God, and it starts to get heavy. You begin to wonder, did I miss something? Did I take a wrong turn? Is he even listening? But what if I told you that silence isn't rejection, it's preparation? That the silence is not a punishment, it's a process. See, there's a moment in every journey, every story, every breakthrough, where everything goes quiet. And it's in that quiet that most people give up. They start doubting themselves. They start doubting their worth. They start doubting the path. But what they don't realize is that God's silence isn't him walking away, it's him stepping back so you can step up. Think about a teacher during an exam. They don't stand over your shoulder giving you all the answers. No, they're silent. Not because they've abandoned you, but because they're watching to see if you've learned what they taught you. The test isn't about showing them what you don't know. It's about proving to yourself how far you've come. That's exactly what God's silence does. It gives you space to rise, space to reflect, space to respond. Now, here's the truth. Most people don't talk about. God doesn't need to shout to prove he's present. His presence is not tied to your emotions. You might feel alone, but you're not left alone. His silence is often his deepest trust in you. Because if you needed constant affirmation, constant noise, constant hand-holding, you'd never grow into the person he designed you to be. Sometimes, the silence is the training ground. It's where your character is built. It's where your faith is stretched. It's where your patience is tested. The silence teaches you to depend not on your feelings, but on your foundation. You stop asking, why is God not speaking? And start saying, what is he building in me during this stillness? And I know it's hard. We live in a world where silence feels uncomfortable. Everything's loud. Notifications, opinions, distractions. So when God goes quiet, we panic. But the greatest warriors, the most powerful leaders, the most spiritually awakened people, they all had to walk through silence before they walked in purpose. You look at any great person of faith, of strength, of wisdom. They all had that moment where the heavens were quiet, and yet they kept going. That's the test. That's the refinement. That's the plan. Let me tell you something personal. Some of the hardest moments in my life were the ones when I felt like God had gone completely silent. Like I was shouting into a void. And it hurt. But looking back, those were the exact moments I was being shaped. I didn't realize it then, but I wasn't being ignored. I was being trusted. And that shift in perspective changed everything. Because when you understand that God's silence is part of his plan, you stop begging for the noise and start embracing the stillness. You stop chasing confirmation and start anchoring yourself in conviction. You realize that if he's silent, it means you're ready for the next level. And he's just watching you step into it. You don't grow in the spotlight. You grow in the shadows. You don't evolve in the noise. You evolve in the quiet. God's silence is not his absence. It's his confidence in who you're becoming. And maybe, just maybe, he's waiting for you to hear your own voice, to trust your own steps, to believe that even without a sign, you're still on the right path. There comes a point where the silence around you gets so loud, you can't ignore it anymore. You've prayed, you've pleaded, you've asked for clarity, and still nothing. And at first, that silence feels like a void, like you've been left behind, overlooked, forgotten. But what if that silence isn't punishment at all? What if it's an invitation to finally hear yourself, to meet the version of you that only shows up when everything else fades away? Because let's be honest, most of us live life surrounded by noise. The expectations of others, the opinions, the pressure, the distractions, all telling us who we should be, what we should do, how we should feel. And we get so used to that noise, we forget what our own voice sounds like. We become strangers to ourselves. We chase approval, validation, applause, and in the process, we lose alignment. We forget who we were before the world told us who to be. But then comes the silence, and at first it's uncomfortable, it feels empty. You start reaching for answers, for signals, for something, anything, to break the stillness. But here's the shift: the silence isn't against you, it's for you. Because when God goes quiet, it's often so you can go inward. So you can stop relying on everything around you and finally start leaning on what's within you. That's where you start uncovering what matters. That's where the noise clears and the truth comes to the surface. Your values, your vision, your wounds, your desires. Things you buried just to survive in a noisy world. In the silence, they rise. And when they do, you're faced with a powerful opportunity to finally be honest with yourself. Not perform, not pretend, just be. See, you don't find your strength when everything's loud and easy. You find it when things go quiet and you have to dig deep. That's where you find the real you. The one who doesn't need to be seen to feel worthy. The one who doesn't need constant affirmation to believe. The one who can stand alone and still feel whole. People think clarity comes from answers, but often it comes from space, from silence, from solitude. And when you stop fighting the silence and start listening to it, that's when the breakthrough happens. That's when you realize you're not lost. You've just never really listened before. You've been moving so fast, trying to do everything right, please everyone, fix everything, that you never gave yourself permission to just sit with your soul. And that's where God meets you. Not in the noise of the world, but in the whisper within. In that still, sacred space where you're finally real with yourself. Where you stop asking, what do they want from me? And start asking, what does my spirit need right now? Let's get something straight. Self-discovery isn't always pretty. Sometimes it feels like breaking down. Sometimes it feels like letting go of everything that once made you feel safe. But that's the point. The silence isn't there to comfort you. It's there to cleanse you, to strip away the layers that no longer serve you, to free you from the roles you've been performing so you can finally step into the truth of who you are. And when you meet that version of you, the one that's unshaken, rooted, whole, you don't need the noise anymore. You don't need constant signs or outside approval. You've found something deeper. You've found yourself. You ever notice how nature never rushes? A tree doesn't panic when it loses its leaves. It doesn't beg for spring in the middle of winter. It trusts the process. It leans into the rhythm of the seasons. And the same goes for your life. Every season has a purpose, even the silent ones, especially the silent ones. But here's where people get stuck. They think silence means stagnation. That if they're not hearing, seeing, or feeling something big from God, then nothing is happening. But the truth is, some of the most powerful transformation happens in the quietest moments. Think about it. When do roots grow deeper? Not during the storm. Not when the sun is shining and everything looks good on the surface. Roots grow deep in stillness, in darkness, underground, where nobody sees it. And the same is true for you. In those seasons where it feels like God is quiet, when your prayers go unanswered, when your efforts seem to fall flat, that's not a waste. That's the preparation. That's the stretch. That's the season where your roots are going deeper than ever before. We live in a world that celebrates visibility. Growth we can show. Success we can post. But God doesn't just care about the surface. He cares about the foundation. He's not just building what people will see. He's shaping what no one sees. Your patience, your integrity, your endurance, your character. And that takes time. That takes silence. That takes seasons where everything looks still, but everything isn't. I get it. Some of you are in a season where you feel stuck, like you're in a winter phase of life. It's cold, it's quiet. It feels like nothing is growing, and you're tempted to believe nothing ever will. But winter doesn't mean death. It means rest. It means rebuilding. It means that what's coming next needs the stillness you're in now. Without winter, spring loses its power. Without the quiet, the breakthrough loses its meaning. We want the harvest, but we don't want the process. We want the blessing, but not the silence that prepares us to carry it. But there's no shortcut to strength. There's no fast track to maturity. There's no skip button on your season. You have to go through it. You have to trust it. And when you do, you start to understand that God's timing isn't just about delays. It's about divine development. Think about every season of nature. Spring brings growth. Summer brings energy. Fall brings release. Winter brings stillness. And every single one of them is necessary. You can't live in summer forever. You'll burn out. You can't live in spring forever. You'll outgrow your space. Just like the earth has to rotate through all 4 seasons to sustain balance, so does your life. The silence you're in isn't a punishment. It's part of the cycle. It's the part where God is protecting what's precious, preserving what's fragile, and preparing what's powerful. But the problem is, we compare seasons. We look at someone else in their summer while we're in our winter and think we've been forgotten. We scroll through highlight reels and assume we're behind. But you're not behind, you're becoming. And you can't rush becoming. You can't microwave your purpose. Some things only develop in time, in tension, and yes, in silence. So if you're in a silent season, don't despise it. Lean into it. Ask yourself, what is this silence teaching me? What part of me is being strengthened, even if I can't see it? Because one day, when the season shifts, and it will, you'll realize this quiet chapter was never a detour. It was a design. You know what's interesting? Most people quit right before the breakthrough. They hang on through the storm. They survive the silence. They push through the waiting. But then it just gets too quiet, too long, and they start to believe the silence is permanent. So they let go. They walk away. But what they don't realize is that the silence isn't the end. It's the threshold. It's the doorway you have to stand at before everything changes. The silence is not a signal to quit. It's a setup for what's coming next. That's how it works. The blessing doesn't come when it's easy. The answer doesn't arrive when you're most comfortable. It comes right after you've reached the edge of yourself, when you've exhausted your own strength, when you've wrestled with the unknown, when you've stayed committed in the dark. That's when the breakthrough shows up. Not when you're shouting for it, but when you've surrendered to the silence and said, I trust the process even when I can't predict the outcome. It's in that surrender that everything begins to shift. Let me be clear. Your breakthrough isn't waiting for you to be perfect. It's waiting for you to be ready. And sometimes the silence is how God makes sure you're ready. Because if the answer came too early, you might mishandle it. If the opportunity showed up before your character was strong enough, it might crush you. So God waits, not to punish you, but to prepare you, not to deny you, but to develop you into someone who can sustain the blessing when it arrives. There's a part of this journey that requires you to believe even when you don't feel anything, to stay faithful when there's no confirmation. And that's hard. That's real. It's not inspirational. It's transformational. Because faith doesn't grow in the light. It grows in the silence. It grows when you choose to believe the breakthrough is coming, even when every part of your mind is whispering that maybe it never will. But listen, every silent chapter ends. Every unanswered prayer has its moment. Every storm runs out of rain. There's a pattern here if you're paying attention. Breakthrough always follows silence. Always. The growth you can't see, the change that's been brewing, the momentum that's been building behind the scenes. All of it comes rushing in the moment you decide, I'm not giving up here. I'm not turning back just because I don't hear anything. I'm not going to confuse silence with abandonment. Because that's what the enemy wants you to think, that silence means you've been forgotten. But the truth is, you've been forged. You've been shaped in the silence into someone who's not just begging for a blessing, but ready to carry one. And when that breakthrough comes, and it will, you'll realize it wasn't random. It was the reward for the silent faith, the quiet obedience, the daily decision to stay the course, even when nothing made sense. You'll look back on that chapter and say, that was the moment I became who I was meant to be. Not when everything was loud and exciting, but when everything was quiet and you chose to trust anyway. That's the power of breakthrough. It's not just about receiving. It's about becoming. Becoming the version of you that can hold what's next without falling apart. The version of you that doesn't need the noise anymore to believe you're chosen, to believe you're capable, to believe you're ready. And when you reach that place, when the silence ends and the door opens, you don't just step into the blessing. You own it because you know what it cost you and you know who you had to become to be able to stand in it. The silence wasn't the end. It was the making of you.